So this is going to be the start of our first section of the shared weapons tale. This is actually going to be for indoors and outdoors. So I've just got some samples. All of my samples actually are from a library. I haven't designed anything. Once the system is set up, I might go back to a lot of the samples that I've used as an example and try to make something a bit more interesting. But for right now, this is perfect for demonstration purposes. So let's see what our indoor tales sound like. This is a small concrete room. This is a medium concrete room. And this is a large concrete room. So those are basically just illustrations of different sized rooms. Like I said in the intro, it's not really representative of how a gun might sound, but at least this communicates what size the room is and lets the player know. Okay, so once we go from there, we need to create a MetaSound. So let's do a MetaSound source, and we can call this weapon shared tales. So all our single fire weapons can use this MetaSound. It's going to be a little bit different for automatic weapons. To be honest, I would actually create a patch with all this information, because something that's very interesting that I learned is that a MetaSound cannot be triggered more than once from within another MetaSound. It's basically a reference to one MetaSound. So even if you have a repeat delay in a sequence, it will only ever trigger this MetaSound once. So if you want to have an automatic weapon that might need to trigger the sound several times, you should really have a patch. But I'll show you how to create patches later. Just for ease of use, and because I'm only demonstrating a single fire weapon, I'm going to create a MetaSound source, and then we can just plug that source into another MetaSound source for a single fire weapon. And I'll show you how to do that much later on. But for right now, we have our blank MetaSound with absolutely nothing in there. And I'm going to create a system for switching between rooms. And the first thing that we need to do for that is, in fact, create a patch. And that patch is going to basically choose an integer, 1, 2, or 3, and then that will select which room tail I want. So we have the MetaSound, and we can just minimize this for now. And let's create a audio MetaSound patch. And we can call this MetaSound patch, so MSP, and then switch, because we could potentially use it for something else that is not rooms. And we can say 3 inputs, because this will switch between 3 different inputs, obviously. And then we open this up, and what do we need? We need a play input, obviously. And we can call this, or actually we should call it trigger, and this will be a trigger, and we're going to pull this in, and then we want a wave player. We're going to go for stereo because we don't need mono, because we will have our nice little converter at the end of the MetaSound source that creates a mono version, and we want 3 of these. And what are we going to do with these? Because we don't only want these to ever be for weapon tail, so that's what we're going to use for this precise example. We can have this, switch between, this is a switch for any 3 inputs, so we can use it for something else later. So we don't want to name things too specifically. So let's call this, let's promote this to an input, and we want to make it an array because we potentially want to randomize our tails. We don't always want the exact same one to play, even though in this example we will have that. And then, so we need a shuffle before we can play it. We need to shuffle it. That's basically a randomization. Then you trigger the array from there and play it. So the value goes like this. And now you have basically a random player. And you can choose auto shuffle. Cool. So let's put these together. Trigger. Also, just to make things a little bit neater, I'm going to copy paste this instead of bringing lines from there. Can actually go with a wave asset A, and then let's copy paste this and this. And we want to create a new array each time, because this is going to be for our small room. Then we're going to have for medium room. It's got to be an input, not a variable. Let's copy the name there and paste it here, B. And then for this one again, promote to input. Why is it an input? Because this is a patch, and we're going to want to input it from this MetaSound. So again, let's paste here, wave asset C. And just again, I've named this wave asset A, B, and C because it might not necessarily always be rooms we want to swap, right? This patch is going to be for switching between any 3 inputs. We might want one for 4 or 5 or whatever, and we can just copy and paste more or less, but unfortunately we can't, or at least I don't know how to make a sort of like dynamic 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 inputs just by clicking on a plus icon, you know. But for this exact example we need 3. So let's trigger, and then basically what we want to say, if any of these finished, any 3, we can then end, and we need an output of finished. That can be a trigger again. So now basically what is going to happen is, well, currently it's not really going to work, right? Because anything is going to trigger, they're going to trigger all of these, and if any of them goes, then it's going to go and finish. So now we have to do the logic of how do we choose which parameter to play. Do we want a small room? Do we want a big room? Etc. So this way we go to trigger compare, and we want to do an integer for this specific case. And we say promote to input, and that will be called input parameter. Again, we're giving this kind of general names because it might not be the case that we always want to use this switch for rooms. Maybe we'll want to use it for switching between, are you upstairs, downstairs, or in a basement? That's just an example. There could be a lot of reasons why you want to have 3 different sounds trigger on basically on a switch. It could even be distances, although I wouldn't use the specific version for distances, but it could be, you know, close, medium, or far, and then you have a hard switch instead of a crossfade, which could be useful if you really want to save performance, but yeah, I wouldn't do it that way either. Okay, so what we want to do is trigger the compare, and what we want to say is if you are room 1, which can be a small room, so it equals room 1, then you play through this. And then we do it again. We say if you are room 2, which could be the medium room, then you play through here. And then same again, obviously. Cool, so now we're basically selecting between the parameters. This trigger comes in, it says, hey, I want to play any 3 of these, and then it goes to here and it says, okay, which one is it? Is it room 1? Then you can play this. If it's room 2, then you can go there. And if it's room 3, then you can go here. Or if it's upstairs, you go here. If it's this floor, you go there. And if it's the basement, you go there. Or if you're, you know, whatever. You can select any kind of input that you want this to be. And these wave assets are also generic. So we haven't set this up specific for our weapons yet. Then what do we need? We actually need some audio to come out of here as well, don't we? So what we can do is we can have a mixer 3, stereo mixer 3. And what do we need again? We need an output. So output, add an output, audio out. We need to make sure that's audio, and we can copy and paste that, audio. And actually I'm going to do something a little bit cheeky here. Let's do audio, let's do mono as well. Audio, mono, oops, audio, mono. And what do? We bring these in, left, we bring this in, right. And how are we going to do a mono signal? We can do our cheeky mid, side, encode, mid, side, decode. And we put these 2 like this. And we say spread amount to 0. And this will then play a mono signal out of left and right, and then all we have to do here is put the left signal there. So this basically what this does is sum up the audio. It's finding out what are the mids and what are the sides, and then it's making the spread 0 from left and right, and then from there we're then splitting it back out into left and right signal. What we don't want is, you know, if you just bring this out, it's only going to be the mids, and if you just bring this out, it's only going to be the sides. But this combines it then again into a left and right signal, but the left and right signal is then going to be a combination of the mids and sides, and then you can bring it into mono. So this is just a way of having an extra output that's mono. I'm not sure if this will then make the MetaSound cost more because it's doing more processing. But what it means is that you can then have this MetaSound patch that can then work for mono and stereo MetaSounds. So I can show you here. This is currently a mono MetaSound, and if we say MetaSound, you can then, you know, trigger this, and you can just have a mono out like that, and you don't have to necessarily do this whole thing in your MetaSound source. Or what we want a stereo MetaSound. So we do this stereo, and then now we don't want mono, we want it out left and right. And this is unfinished for now. Okay, so what is that gonna sound like? Well, first of all, we need to add these. So this is now no longer an input, but a variable. Although actually, no, I will say it's an input because we will actually then plug this MetaSound into our larger MetaSound later. I'll show you. But let's make that an input. And this array we will have for wave asset A, we want it to be room 1. So we can then say indoor concrete small and then promote to input wave asset B. Let's call this add concrete medium. So this is an array, so you can have 6 or 8 different random tails. So it's not always the same one, but this is just for example purposes. I only need one audio. And so exactly, oops, input, yep, large. There we go. And the input parameter should be, this definitely has to be an input because you're gonna feed this in from the game world. So you'll probably need an audio volume that says which room are you in, 1, 2, or 3, or 4. Well, 0, 1, 2, 3. 0 being outside, 1, 2, and 3 being small, medium, or large room. So this input parameter is room size, and this wave asset is wave asset small room, medium room, and large room. So you see how the patch is generic, so this can be used for anything, whatever else we want to use it for. Maybe it's not for small, medium, large room, it's for something else. And these input parameters are still named generically, but now that we're using it in the MetaSound source, I want to say, hey, this is actually for the wave asset for the small room and wave asset for the medium room and large. So that's the difference between file naming for generic purpose patches and for very specific weapon share tails MetaSound. So let's see what that sounds like. First of all, we have to set a room size, 1. There we go, small, medium, and large. Oh, large is not working. Why is large not working? Because this is 2 still. 3. There we go. Large. Cool, so now we have our small, medium, and large room. And you see here the relative cost here is only 1, because only one of these sounds is being selected because we have this trigger compare. If we didn't have this and we played it straight away and then we used volume, you would still be having 3 sound effects being triggered, and then the volume would just turn 2 of them down, but they would still be being processed. So this trigger compare is actually super useful for a lot of different purposes for optimization. Okay, so that is our very first step. After this, I'll move on to the tails and distance. For that, we will be creating a crossfade by parameter, which is a little bit more complex, but actually quite similar to this as well. So see you in the next one.